So thank you everybody for attending today's seminar or webinar. It is the first of a series that we are doing in a partnership between the Greater Naples Chamber and Local IQ. We got together with Local IQ to try to provide an additional service and value to all of our members, which is how to reach your consumers in a very efficient, effective way to grow your business. So what Shawna, who is the president of the local Naples Daily News and regional vice president of Gannett Local IQ, is going to walk us through is what they have learned and what they do learn on a regular basis from different market trends and different industries as they scoured the entire web for insights that are coming from the consumers that we are trying to reach. So without further ado, I will let Shawna introduce herself and Local IQ, and then of course go into our presentation. Thank you, Shawna, for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex, for having me, and good morning, everyone. I know, Alex alluded to this. A lot of us had plans for today, and I know that some of those plans have been disrupted both due to the weather, but also because camps and schools are not open. And so I'm wishing you and your family well today as we kind of navigate that. So as Alex said, we're going to talk about the home services sector, and importantly, how to grow the business. And as we're engaging with decision makers and owners in this category, we know that this is a category that's experiencing a lot of demand. So our focus is really going to be on how do we grow the business even when we're busy. And as was mentioned, a lot of the data that you'll see presented in this morning's session is being powered by Local IQ. And in just a few slides, I'll tell you a little bit about how we're doing that. So Alex touched on the partnership. I think it makes enormous sense for Local IQ and the USA Today Network locally. You, of course, know us as the Naples Daily News and the Greater Naples Chamber to really partner. Our missions are very much aligned. And ultimately, when we are driving strong local businesses and a strong environment in which those businesses can operate, our community is better served. And when we think about the technology that we've invested in, the tools that we're able to bring to market, and our ultimate goal to help the communities that we serve thrive, there's just a lot of synergy between our two organizations. And of course, Alex brings an enormous amount of marketing experience to the equation as well. And so my hope is that while we're going to present a lot of data, and while I hope it's very actionable for you, also just Alex and I having a conversation about not only the data, but what the data might potentially mean for you will make this a good, effective use of the next hour or so of your time. So we get a lot of questions around the name Local IQ. I totally get that. I mean, we're an almost 100-year-old brand under the Naples Daily News. And so why are we, muddying the waters connected to our brand identity? And I just wanted to take a second and just call this out for a moment. The name is really methodical. It's all about being local. It's the heart and dedication of having that local partner. We're being powered by that national network, and also the long legacy that we've had to serve the local community. But as everyone on this call knows, marketing has become more complex. And so our job in a lot of ways is to take the IQ part of our name and make sure that we're bringing data, insights, knowledge, things around what is working, best practices, to help in a lot of ways simplify that process. So it's not about our partners understanding, all of the nuances around how marketing has changed, but it is about being a transparent partner and helping you answer what in a lot of ways is an age-old question of what parts of your marketing campaign are working and how do those marketing goals really tie back to your business goals, so ultimately your brand is growing. So as we start the meat of the presentation today, just a couple of things that we'll touch on and that I'm hoping that you walk away from this time with more understanding around. So one is the consumer journey, and especially how that consumer journey is being impacted within the home improvement category with increased search. And so we know that there is an increase in demand within this category, and we know that a lot of that demand is showing up by people searching. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Because of that increased demand, there's definitely a crowded marketplace. And so how do we help partners really stand out in that crowded marketplace? And then how to generate more leads even if you're busy, or to focus on the efficiencies of the buy. So right now, we are talking to a lot of clients about the type of leads that they're generating. In this category specifically, how do we prioritize the lifetime value of different types of customers or prospective customers that are coming into your brand. And then if you're really happy with the types of leads that you're getting, and you're happy with the amount of leads that you're getting, it really becomes around the efficiency of the buy and how do we do that in a way that has transparency and ultimately gets you kind of more for less. And so we'll talk a little bit about some technology that has really entered the space that can help brands do just that. Alex, do you have anything that you'd like to add as far as takeaways from this time?
No, I'm excited to get into the meat of it, but what I always look for is, and I'll set it up this way: what you're trying to do is reach those people who are actually in the market for you, right? Anything else anybody else who's not receptive to your message, or who's not ready to buy, or who's just not in the market for what you're offering, anytime that you pay to get in front of them, it can be considered almost a wasted impression unless it's creating something else, is achieving another objective that you're trying to achieve. So having these tools to be able to get to the right people efficiently and effectively, it's really important. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex. So as I mentioned, definitely the marketing arena has really changed, right? And I love this slide as we think about starting this journey into what consumers are doing to be able to find brands, because consumers are doing a lot. And I won't walk through each of these points, but every minute of every day, there is an enormous amount of activity that's being generated digitally. Everything from there's 510,000 comments that are posted on Facebook every single minute, to there's 694,000 videos that are viewed on TikTok. And TikTok was something that didn't even exist a few years ago. And so not only are you seeing the fragmentation of how people are spending their time, the enormous amount of time that they're spending digitally, but also how disruption really plays into how consumers are learning about different products, about what they're going to do in their day, and how they are engaging with both brands, but also just people who are in their lives. And so just an enormous amount of bits of data that are left across our digital footprint, and opportunity for us as brand leaders to think about how are we going to plug in, or is this the appropriate way to show up? Every single one of these arenas where people are spending time has an intrinsic value from a marketing standpoint. But one of the things that we balance is because nobody has an unlimited budget, and if you do have an unlimited budget, Alex and I would definitely like to speak to you. But because nobody has an unlimited budget, one of the things that we do is that in the universe of places that your brand could be, what are the top places that you should be, really with that focus on efficiency? And so we'll talk a little bit about that. We know that from a consumer perspective within the home improvement segment that there are a lot of new projects that are coming. And some of this is impacted by COVID. I know I'm just speaking from personal experience as we were, in the safer at home and we were staying at home more. I was having a lot of conversations with decision makers in this category. And I'm like, well, the data is telling us that people as their home are deciding that I've been putting off that bathroom renovation and now I just can't live with that old bathroom anymore. Meanwhile, I was telling my husband, like, I can't deal with this color in the study, right? And so we actually painted our study multiple times because we painted it and then realized we didn't like the color and painted it again. And so there's just an abundance of the kind of the tackling of the to-do list and pending projects. There was a backlog of projects and we really got after those projects in a strong way. We've also thought a little bit about ensuring the health and safety and just functionality of our sanctuary, right? So increases around things like air treatment, indoor air quality. We've been seeing increases in searches and demand around smart filtration systems, and then just general maintenance, right? So if you've been looking at that fence and thought, one day I'm going to get around to fixing that fence, the day has come, right? We're seeing that both in activity in the market and also on the search side. And then an enormous amount of what we're seeing as we look forward is improvement of the environment. So this has a lot to do with both remote work and then work from home, which are similar but slightly different. And as remote work continues to become something that business leaders are socializing, we are definitely seeing kind of our feeder markets change. And we're getting people who are moving to the area knowing that they're going to keep their job from a company that's based wherever it's based. And they're going to move into a home in Southwest Florida or Naples in particular. And they're going to need their home to really function in a way that might have been different than when the house was initially set up. So making sure that it has good storage, smarter pantries, really thinking about well-defined spaces. So the layout of the house, is it really conducive to the type of life that they think that they're going to be living in that home? Landscaping and backyard updates as we think about people moving into the area and they want to use both their indoor and outdoor spaces, making sure that those outdoor spaces are really functional is a priority. New windows. And so as we sit here on a very rainy day talking about a storm, this is certainly new window or storm proofing season. And then new kitchens and bathrooms. And I think a lot of this kitchen and bathroom work is coming from two different tracks. One being, I've always really wanted this kitchen, but I've been putting it off. And so every time that we get on the other side of something that disrupts our lives, the data really shows us that things that we've been putting off that we really want, we really accelerate, right? And so we're thinking, I just want to make sure that I enjoy that, right? I shouldn't be putting off the things that I want to accomplish. So we see some acceleration around those kitchen and bathroom projects. And then the other thing has to do with just the design choices are changing. And so as people move into new homes and maybe their kitchen is a little too Tuscan, they're really, updating that into more of a coastal modern or contemporary look. And so a lot of demand within those categories. Alex, is there anything that you're seeing as you're talking to members that are outside of some of these projects or changes that are mentioned here?
Well, the biggest thing that wanted to highlight is actually regarding the technology that's available for you to think about these things and then target people based on these trends. So what are the question is for attendees are, what are the trends that you're seeing or that you understand or you're hearing from your customers? And as you're trying to get new customers, don't stop at demographics, don't stop at even behaviors of people who just moved down here, but go a step farther to understand who is thinking about painting their walls, or who is thinking about doing a new kitchen, or who is thinking about being here for a longer period of time, there are ways to reach those consumers specifically and target them, so that you can get in front of the people that really matter to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. And I think that, understanding this type of data, and that's why I wanted to start here. What is the opportunity? And then build your campaign based on the opportunity. Because underneath each of these projects, or in these subcategories under home improvement, you're going to find demographic information. Maybe people that are redoing their kitchens or redoing their bathrooms tend to be a certain demographic profile, and that's important. We want to understand that, because how those people engage with media is different, and it helps us get back to what I was speaking about prior around kind of calling your shot, right? So what are the tactics that we want to use, and how does your brand want to show up within those tactics? The other thing that I think is important around framing up the opportunity is you all have a digital storefront in the form of your website. And so thinking about content that's on your website, one of the big trends that has changed from a search perspective is with me searches, right? And so that was something that didn't even exist. We've been talking about near me searches for a long time. Who's the best plumber near me? But now we have, because video has become a huge part of the search environment, we're getting a lot of searches that are, fix this faucet with me, right? It kind of like a step-by-step direction piece. And so a lot of times, when I'm speaking to decision makers in this category, they'll say, yeah, I get it. There's growth within that, with me segment, but why would I want to show up there? That sounds a lot like somebody who's a do-it-yourselfer. And I always point back to this story. As things go, our AC unit stopped working in the middle of the night. For some reason, that seems to be how things work in my house. The smoke alarm beeps in the middle of the night, the AC unit stops working in the middle of the night. So my husband decided he was going to fix it. And so he got out the ladder and was up in our attic, and then, would come down and search for things, and then would go back up into the attic. And we probably played this out in our house 15, 20 times, up, down, up, down. And so I think initially he thought he was going to be a do-it-himselfer. But then we ultimately ended up calling a professional, and they came out and fixed the problem in less than 20 minutes. And so we certainly see, as we follow the consumer journey, that a lot of people who start out, especially in certain categories, as maybe I can fix this on my own, actually tend to convert over to being somebody that reaches out to a professional. And so thinking about having that content on your website, and then making that appeal to, you don't have to do this alone, give us a call, we can, handle this, is a great way for you to show up when a consumer is thinking about doing it themselves, and then ultimately convert them into a prospect as they decide that that's not really something that they want to be doing, or candidly that they cannot do.
That's definitely happened to me too. It's just, you start DIY and then you convert, and that's where you want to be.
Yeah, and a lot of times, and I say this lovingly, Alex, the wives know, right? So as my husband's
Yeah.
up and down on the ladder, I'm searching for who we're going to call once he finally gives up on this mission.
Sure.
So we know that this opportunity that's coming in the way of the home improvement sector is coming from shifting budgets. And we're going to talk a little bit about budgets here, and how we're seeing the impact of these 3 points. We've got a pretty significant shift from commuting budgets. We have another significant shift from vacation budgets. I know, like probably some of you on the call, we often are budgeting for a big family trip every year, and that's something that we really haven't done now in a bit. And so that budget is something that we can absorb into something else that maybe we've been putting off, and candidly that will make us feel good because we're not able to do the thing that we were initially planning for. And then another, big shift around restaurants, but actually underneath that category in general is just entertainment, right? So if your form of entertainment was restaurants or going to a concert, there's money that's really being absorbed. And where is that money going? It's going into projects. And so we can see that show up here. This is 2018, 19, and 20 average home improvement investment. And so you can see how that's really grown. And it's not because, as I mentioned, that the households are growing in income. It's because home improvement is benefiting from some shifts. So let's take a look at the consumer and what their journey looks like. So in addition to everything related to factors kind of connected to COVID, or for us, connected to people moving to the state, we are seeing just an enormous amount of increase in overall ownership. And a lot of this is being driven by millennials purchasing homes, and home ownership as that grows is driving some of those things that we've touched on around, like, is this house functional for the type of lifestyle that I want? Do I need to make some improvements to it? Or is it done in the style that's really in keeping with my personality? And then to Alex's point, it's only after we really understand, like, where are the opportunities? Are the opportunities at the appropriate amount of average value to really grow the business? And then we define those buckets and we can start looking at demographics that really play into that. And the reason that we do look at demographics, sometimes people will say, well, if you know that that this person is interested in redoing their kitchen, why wouldn't we just focus on people who are interested in redoing their kitchen? It's because the way that the baby boomer searches or engages with digital technology is different than the way that a millennial or a Gen Xer searches or engages with technology. And that is only relevant as a way to make sure that you're in the appropriate places. So back to that situation around budget, we want to make sure that if online display, for example, is really important for millennials, that we're there. And if reviews are really important for baby boomers, that you're there. So it's just a way to help us prioritize. So within the home services industry, we end up with two really dominant demographics. We have baby boomers, and so they're 55 to 74, a high percentage of home ownership, so that's not a surprise that they would pop as a key category. They're more likely to live in a home that is 30 years or older, and they are really focused on a couple of home improvement projects, aging in place and comfort and safety. So they are also, thinking about, how is this home going to serve me over the long run? They're looking to repair aging home systems and features, and then they want to fulfill on that dream bath that they've been putting off, or the dream kitchen, or the dream whatever, their ideal patio, so that they can make sure that they're gaining enjoyment out of their house. And then older millennials, or the Gen X segment, so their ages 35 to 44, 64% are homeowners, and that is a factor that is continuing to grow. They're most likely to be newer to home ownership, and they're really focused on updating the style and fit to growing family needs, repairing aging home systems and features, and increasing the value and efficiency of their homes. So this is the segment where we see a lot of that smart home technology really coming to bear. So what's the road to purchase? It's messy, right? It's convoluted and it's windy, and depending on the folks that you're trying to reach, it even becomes more nuanced. But if we kind of elevate it to 50,000 feet, and then we'll take a little bit of a deeper look, it really looks like an initial search. I call this day zero. So you hear something that moves you into the product or the purchase road. Maybe you're standing in line to buy milk and you hear someone talking about xeriscaping, and you pull out your phone and you say, what is xeriscaping? So there's a search around information. And then you're reading the article for advice on different landscaping techniques. Maybe you email a friend for advice that has some experience in this. You're visiting a landscaping site and you're reading reviews and you're really comparing brands. And it's underneath this that once you start visiting websites, that you're going to start getting some remarketing and display ads, right? So you're going to start falling into that category that Alex was talking about, where you've done enough things for the internet machine to see you as somebody that's really an ideal prospect for this type of category and for these types of ads. And as we finish up the session today here in just a little bit, I'm going to talk a little bit about some disruption that's happening within the ability to target just this way and how we're jumping that. But we'll save that for the end. And then you go back to search. Now, the really interesting thing is that in almost every category of purchase path, it starts with search and it ends with search. The initial search is around getting information. The last search is about, I've made my decision that I want to do a thing, and now I need to find the brand that ultimately I'm going to commit to. So when we look at drivers, right, what really impacts that last thing that moves somebody over the edge and moves them into, I'm going to pick up the phone and call. You can see, and this is why it's important to define differences between demographic groups. You can see that there are some nuances between the two key demographic groups of baby boomer and millennial. Everything from social media content being something that's very compelling to millennials and maybe not as compelling to baby boomers. And the reason that you want to understand this information or have a partner who understands this information is that your brand is going to show up in a social media environment, because we understand that that's one of the areas that we need to get right to grow the home improvement segment of business. Because we know that it's millennials that are the most influenced by that, we want to make sure that we're targeting that demographic. And then even the pictures that we present in those ads, we know that it's going to be millennials that convert. And the truth is that we have a lot of banner blindness, meaning we're just so overwhelmed by logos and brands every day. Because if we go back to that, everything that happens in a digital minute, we are consuming so much information. And so from a human interaction, we are more likely to take in, absorb a brand impression when the people that are in those ads look and feel like us, right? So if we understand the targeting, we can then make sure that the personas that we're presenting in those ads match the target information. And so that makes that brand impression more likely to be absorbed. And so I won't go through, we're going to send you all of this information. I won't go through all the pieces. It's just mainly to pull out the importance of understanding who's your ideal target, how are those people making a decision around your brand, and how can you influence that decision?
Also, Shawna, I wanted to remind everybody that if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to either raise your hand or use the Q&A function. And by raising a hand, if you are not familiar with it, there's a button at the bottom of the screen that says raise hand. That allows us to know that you have a question. Or please use the Q&A function, which then allows us to see what questions are pending, or message me directly. That either way is fine. In all of this, there's a lot of content here. So if there are any terminology or we say anything that really doesn't resonate with you or doesn't, you don't know, please feel free to use the Q&A function or message me privately. We'll address that.
Absolutely. This is your time. And so we want to make sure that it's really valuable for you. And so this is just another look at that product decision-making roadmap broken out by baby boomer and millennial based on the data that we just went through. And so one of the easiest ways for us to have this conversation, which can be a pretty data-driven conversation, is to just go through the scenario, right? So how does the baby boomer find a gutter cleaning company based on what we understand about how they're engaging versus how does a millennial do that? And so ultimately, what you're seeing here is us getting down to that promise that we made you at the beginning around what are, out of the whole universe of things that need to be accomplished or could be accomplished in your digital marketing plan, where are the things that you absolutely have to get right? And so you can see those tethers back to them. Social media content, making sure that word of mouth and that really connects to your digital reviews, your social ads, search, and then streaming video and email, right? So we've taken that whole big, everything that happens in a digital minute and gotten it down to the things that we need to focus on in order for you to grow your business.
And then, Shawna, I wanted to add something that I think is really important on the last slide, which is the difference between social media content that you create and post organically and the social media ads, right? So just everybody, if you don't know this, but the different platforms will throttle how much content that comes from you organically is going to be displayed to all the people that you would consider followers, right? So if they like your page or they follow your page or your account on Instagram, on Facebook and all of them, there's about a 2% mark that where the platform will limit, who sees your content. So it's very important as you think about content to not put all of your efforts on only that content that you're planning to share organically. You need to boost that as well to make sure that you're reaching the amount of people that you need to reach.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Alex. A lot of times when we do this frame up, and it's why we break it out separately, when we do this frame up with clients, they'll say, I hear you on the social media side. I know that I need to be there. I have somebody who's generating my content. Maybe it's somebody internally, maybe it's a friend. And that's great. We'll audit the content and it could even be really strong content. To your point, like not a lot of business owners or brand managers understand that that Facebook absolutely is going to have that cap around what percentage of the people that are currently following you actually are seeing that content. And the thing that is driving that is not only because Facebook is a business, right? And so they're having their own mechanism for how content organically is going to get displayed. But when Facebook really started growing, one of the things that they were afraid of is that, and Alex, tell me if this kind of resonates with you or anybody else on the call. You know how like you check Facebook on your phone, and then maybe 3 hours later, you check it on your phone again. Before they started doing this throttling, because so much content was being created, you never made it back to the point where you left off. And so there was kind of this anxiety that was being created around like fear of missing out, like, but I never can catch up. And there's a comfort when you're scrolling and you make it back to something that you saw during your last session, like, I'm caught up now. And so they wanted to be able to give that to their audience. And so there's so much that has happened in those 2 or 3 hours since we last checked that you would never be able to make it back, right? You would need to be scrolling for so long. So they just limit how much you see to give you that feeling of like, I've arrived at where I was when I left off.
Yep. They did that, and also so that they could do different levels or allow different levels of content dissemination for how, depending on how good you were at and how good your content was.
Yes. Yes.
So publishers, will have a lot more leeway. Like we've worked with different people, like very famously, BuzzFeed became a very large and followed content creator on Facebook, and so they had a lot more leeway and how much of their organic content was displayed. News outlets will have that too, but if you are a small company, or if even as an individual, your reach is going to be very, very limited.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex. So how do we take advantage of all of this opportunity that exists? So this category certainly was one of the first to understand that search is driving the show, right? Your consumer journey kind of starts and ends with people searching for products or services that you offer. So one of the things that we've been spending a lot of time on is that when that search ad is presented, what is really creating conversion? So what takes somebody that might be interested in having new gutters put onto their home, go from being a potential prospect into somebody that set up an appointment? So 65% of people click on Google Ad when looking to buy the item. They want to make a purchase decision or that appointment right away. And so we know that the search ads is something that's happening last or near last in that consumer journey. 80% of consumers turn to search engines when looking for a local business. So I've made a decision, I've done all my research, I know that I'm going to invest here, and now I need to find the company that's going to do this for me. And I want it to be somebody who's local, and I want it to be somebody who's pretty close to where I am. 60% of adults in the US use smartphones and tablets to search for services. So I always like to call out here that we want to make sure that not only is the website where we're sending people really set up for the fact that an enormous amount of traffic that's going to come in from search is going to be mobile traffic. And so that experience needs to be like a good experience. We've all gone to a website that the mobile experience is difficult. But we also want to set up the ad units so that if I've already made the decision and I need service, so back to my air conditioning example, I love that, I can click to call right away, right? I don't really need to go to the website at this point. I just want to click to call and make that appointment. So this category has seen, the home improvement sector has seen one of the highest search volume increases over the last several years. And I've just called out some of those examples over on the right. So really large increases in people understanding that this is the space that they want to go to be able to find the businesses that they're going to ultimately engage with. And so we know that it's not about like, hey, you should have a search strategy. A lot of you likely have a search strategy. It's about thinking about that search strategy differently. And so we think of that as finding ways to bring technology to that process. That's something that we manage, so it's not clunky or burdensome for you, but really thinking through how that investment is going to be more efficient for you. And whether you ultimately, have a conversation about whether or not we can be a good partner, or you're having a conversation with others, or you're looking for technology that you can bring to the campaign yourself, here are a couple of things that we know are going to drive a higher efficiency in your search campaign. We want to measure and optimize for leads versus clicks. So this is a bit of a nuance, but the best way that I can describe it is that if we look at kind of the giant in this search space, it's definitely Google. And so when we think about how Google runs their marketplace, because it absolutely is a marketplace where brands are competing against each other for eyeballs of prospective new customers. A lot of that, or the early days of the marketplace was around the cost per click. And so everybody was trying to drive down their cost per click, but that doesn't necessarily correlate to your cash register ringing, right? Leads are the way that we take anonymous traffic that's clicking on an ad and ultimately make it onto your website. And we turn that into something that you or your team can follow up on. So there is technology that exists, both proprietary technology that we have, but also just some other tools that exist in the marketplace that help you understand what types of leads are coming in from the campaign that you're running. And when we say optimized, it's a way in which like we can spend more investment on the things that are turning into leads versus continuing to spend investment in just traffic that's making it onto your website, but doesn't convert at a rate that's going to get you the type of ROI that you need. A lot of this is on our side is machine learning, or sometimes you'll hear that framed up as AI, which sounds like very new, although we've all been interacting with AI for a long time. Like when I go to an ATM and I put my card in, it immediately prompts me in increments of money that I've taken out prior, right? So it has learned that this is what I'm likely to do. That's a form of AI. On our side, we are looking for every single lead that comes in from the website, from a campaign, and saying, what was the environment? What were the factors that really drove that lead? Let's do more of that, and let's do less of the things that are not turning into leads for our clients. The second thing is nurturing non-converting. So, whether it is somebody that turned into a lead and then ultimately did not turn into an appointment for you, or is demographics or prospects that you're sending to your website that aren't ultimately calling you, finding a way to really nurture those people that haven't yet become clients or customers is a way that you're able to get an efficiency of the buy, because you've already paid for the click onto your website. So how do we re-engage those folks? And there's a lot of tech automation that exists so that it doesn't have to be a heavy lift for you, right? And it's everything from setting up emails that push information back out to folks that did not convert into appointments where you have their information, to thinking about remarketing, which is something that we had mentioned prior. And then leveraging the PPC audience or your search audience onto other channels. And so here is a quick call out around, I'd mentioned that one of the things I would touch on is what we call third-party tracking. You may have heard people talk about it as pixels or cookies, not the kind that you eat. But to Alex's point, there's a lot of jargon that exists in the business that we're in. But the simplified piece here is that a lot of platforms or devices are starting to enable users to opt out of tracking. And so I'm sure that you have seen, and if you haven't, you should take a moment or two and just Google it. But I think the brand that is doing the best job taking something that's pretty complex and pretty geeky and making it accessible is Apple. So Apple has a commercial where there's a guy buying a coffee, and then before he knows it, it's like there's this whole crowd of people who are following him. Alex, have you seen that commercial?
Yes, absolutely. I really like that commercial.
Yeah. And so then he's sitting in a chair, and he gets a pop-up and it says, do you want to be tracked, in essence? And he says, he opts out. He says, no tracking. And all the people who've been following him kind of poof, right? So why this is important to marketers is that we've had the ability for so long to be able to say, I want to reach people who are interested in redoing their kitchens. And ultimately, although we may not have been having a conversation with all of our partners about how specifically we're doing that, but there's all these digital breadcrumbs that people are leaving. And we've been slicing and dicing audiences and getting right down to the audience that is the most likely to convert. And we've been using all of that tracking. And people have always had an ability to opt out of that, but it's been kind of clunky and they haven't proactively been asked the question. And so now that people are proactively being asked the question, it disrupts some of our targeting ability on the front end, but it also disrupts in some ways, like just from a general perspective, some of the ability for us to remarket to folks. So one of the things that we've been building, because we've known that this is on the horizon, is a proprietary way to take leads that you already have. So either your existing client base or leads that have come in that haven't converted, or leads that are coming in from your search campaign. And we want to take all of that data that at that point is first party data, it's your data. So there's no restriction in the way that I just described. We're not going to a third party source. So you take all of your first party data and you import that. We take all of that data from you, we put it into our machine, and then we say, we want to message to these folks, but importantly, we want to message to people that look like these folks. And so it allows us to get around some of those parameters. It's an interesting moment for all of us as marketers because we've so long relied on third-party data that we may not have been doing all of the things around your own first-party data that we could have been doing, which is a very rich universe. And this forces us to think creatively. We also have an enormous amount of first-party data. So the USA Today network reaches 1 out of 2 adults. And so one of the benefits that candidly we have right now is that our reliance on third-party data is not as great as somebody that isn't also a publisher at the same time. And so I think that this is a topic that's going to continue. It's certainly something we've been preparing for a little over a year. And the time is now, right? The active opting out of tracking is something that's occurring today. And we certainly as marketers need to think about how are we going to get around that. Don't you love that commercial, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny when you visualize all of the people that you've interacted with in one room, and how would you feel about that? It makes it very real and physical, which is what that overt question is really doing for people now. In the past, it was just like, oh yeah, well, I don't really care. I'm going to accept the disclaimer about cookies. Some people care, some people don't. But that commercial really does make it very, very real.
Absolutely. I love it. So how do you, as we wrap up today, like how do you stand out in what is a very crowded environment? So there are absolutely some ways for you to think about like, how do you win here? So 50% of people that are searching within this category have at least 2 providers in mind. And so what that tells me is that even though we've been spending a lot of time kind of bottom of the funnel, what happens last, how do we convert search, but before anyone even searches, they have been influenced by your brand. So brand really matters. 48% contact 1 to 2 providers to learn more information. So that's another opportunity for you to stand out. So if you're in, we're way down at the bottom, people are making a decision to reach out, they're reaching out, chances are, to more than 1 company. And so how do you respond? How do you use automation to really, win and make people know that you are going to be with them through this journey? Trust and reputation are the top factors when deciding on a provider. And Alex and I have had some pretty deep conversation here. So every bit of information that we look at that is local IQ data or industry data says the same thing, that it's trust and reputation that drive decision making within this category. And yet when we audit creative that's being put out by the category, it normally leads with offer or financing. And
Yeah.
so there's just a real disconnect between what consumers care about first. It's not that they don't care about offers, value, financing. It's just that those are not the core top things that they are using to make that decision. And so we need to make sure that when we're thinking about building a brand, when we're touching consumers throughout, the channels that you're using, that you're continuing to reinforce the high standards that you have for your brand through trust and reputation.
Yeah. And I would say, biggest thing about trust and reputation is that it's not really about your features or the things that really make your product great. I mean, there is an important place for that. But when people, when you're trying to inspire trust and when you're trying to improve your reputation, you want to give out those signals that get to the core of why they are going to be satisfied after you've done all of the work. They don't want to think about the specific details of, how or features and functions that you have to offer. They want to think, yes, I'm going to be satisfied. There is going to be, if I have a problem with it, I'm not going to have to fight anybody to come back. So those are some of the elements that you want to think about as in your communication.
Absolutely. And I think, what you're seeing here really reinforces that, right? So learning about products or services, and importantly, how you handle those products or services through content is a huge piece of building that trust and reputation. And that it is the driving factor. And Alex, to your point, if I need a new kitchen, I want a new kitchen, I know that I'm going to be thinking about quality and product, but I also want to know that the person that you send into my house where my family lives is somebody that is an employee of yours and that you've done a background check on. So there are ways that you can build trust throughout that cycle, both by messaging, but also just, if I go back to the example of the HVAC situation, when I made that appointment, I got a message back from the brand that I made the appointment with saying, Joe Smith is going to be your tech. Here's a picture of him. When the truck showed up, in my driveway, there was an alert that said Joe Smith is here, right? Almost like an Uber situation. And then of course the truck was wrapped, right? So when I looked out front, I could be like, yes, that is all reinforcement that the person that I'm letting into my house is somebody that I have a level of comfort with before they've ever walked through the front door.
Yep.
So when you're thinking about branding, and I know that we really did not build this specifically around how do you build a brand, but I just felt like we'd be remiss if we did not, as we wrap up here, think about how do we build out a robust brand. We want to make sure that we inform, so our content is really relevant and enriches the process. We want to make sure that we engage, so to the best of our ability, that our content is custom and dynamic, that really inspires. And what I mean by custom is that there are ways for you to think about that landing page that you're sending people. Does it specifically relate to things that they were searching for, or are you sending a targeted audience to an environment that's really going to resonate with them? And then we want to connect. So we want to cultivate meaningful audience and brand relationships through storytelling and making sure that the strategy that we have really reinforces our overall brand. And a lot of that has to do with consistency. So in today's world, you can get your tactics, your digital tactics down to 3, 4, 5. We've shown you some of those details here, but your brand needs to show up in a consistent way, right? So whether I'm seeing your message on social, or I'm seeing your message on search, or I'm seeing an online display ad, I should be able to recognize kind of like a golden thread through all of those messages that really represents your brand. And this is part of the challenge, because right now we have a lot of diversification in how brands are deploying their messages. Maybe they have an internal social person, and maybe they have a external partner that they used for search, and then they have a different partner that they used for online display, and that's fine. I mean, we're not here to say that that's not the right way to do it. We just want to make sure that as you're stacking those tactics on top of each other, that it doesn't feel like that's three different people building the message. It's got to feel like one message across three different tactics.
Yeah, and Shawna, we have a question from Elmi Rogers. When it comes to branded video messages, which is better, high quality production or lower quality selfie style? And I'll give it I'll take a stab at it if you're okay with
Yeah,
that.
of course.
So it really, that's a good question, Elmi, and it depends on who is it that you're trying to reach. How are they most likely to pay attention to what you're doing? So sometimes in a very crowded marketplace where you have a lot of video productions that all look the same, maybe they all are high quality, or maybe they're all lower quality. Going with the inverse, can make a big difference. So it really is up to the context in which you're about to advertise. That said, one of the biggest watch outs or concerns that I usually have with lower quality selfie style messages is if you have just learned that in your industry, one of the main drivers of decision making is trust and reputation. If they see you, um, doing a lower quality selfie style message, then you better be really, really good at connecting through that message, or that person that you're putting in front of the camera be very, very good at genuinely being authentic, and therefore not distracted by the lower quality. Because otherwise, if what they're expecting is as a high quality of work, that also comes through even almost subliminally or subconsciously through that production as well. So if I'm expecting somebody who is really a high-end professional, I want the best of the best, I am buying or building a multi-million-dollar home, and the way I see them communicate seems very, very too casual for me, not really my style, I don't understand why they're doing it that way, I'm going to shy away from the message that they're trying to put across.
Yeah, and if I can just tie a bow on that, Alex, I do think that it has a lot to do with like the subcategory and the demographic. And so like I'm going to answer from a more broad perspective, but then I think that it's also worth having like a more individual conversation around that as well. But my general thinking on top of everything that Alex just shared is that if you cannot right now, like the budget's the budget and you can't stretch the budget, and you are letting the fact that you can't invest in high quality video production stop you from doing video, let's work together to find a more creative solution for that. Because sometimes, to Alex's point, it has a lot to do with the talent that you're putting in front of kind of what we would call that B footage, right? So is there somebody on your team that can show up professionally and authentically and can do, B-roll video for you well, that serves your brand? And the reason that I say that is that, so some of you may know that Google owns YouTube. And if you didn't know that, then you probably have seen when you're searching, you now get presented more towards the top of the screen video. And so one of the ways that we help brands think through winning in the search space is how much real estate can they own, right? And so if you're putting out video blog content consistently that is relevant to how people are searching, you have the potential to own more real estate on that page. And so I think it's worth a conversation around, like, let's talk about the subcategory of home improvement. What type of engagement do we see? And then what's the overall investment levels that that the company has to work with right now, and how can we prioritize and get really creative?
Thank you.
So just a couple of things, and I wanted to provide these as kind of follow-ups, is that companies are using marketing automation. More than half now have some type of formalized marketing automation process. And mainly what they're doing is that our attention span as consumers is so incredibly brief. And so if we submit a form fill or we submit an email, we want an immediate response back. And in a lot of the local shops, right, the business owners that we're dealing with, they don't have somebody just standing around like waiting to get back to that person immediately. And so being able to, when somebody submits a form fill or submits an email, to get them a reply back that says, like, this has been received, we will get back to you in the next 20 minutes. When we do reach out to you, here are the 3 or 4 things that you can expect from that call, and have, you know, these 1 or 2 things ready to make the time really valuable. Like the prospect is then like, okay, like, I am on somebody's radar. I don't feel like I need to keep shopping, right? I don't feel like I need to continue searching for somebody who's going to engage with me. And then marketers that are using omni-channel marketing, and this is where we are seeing some disruption, as we've talked about, but the term here, omni-channel, is what Alex was speaking about at the beginning, where it's less about the specific tactic and more about, I want to reach people that have this type of behavior and have done these types of things, which show me that they are my target audience. And so wherever that person is, right, whether they are on a CNN website or a Fox website, your ad, your message is able to show up in their world. It used to be that these omni-channel placements were something that only really large national brands used, right? Because the tech stack, the conversation, the access to partners that understood how to fulfill was something that only was held at that, you know, national level. And over the last couple of years, it's really come down to the local level. And every time we pull this data, the number becomes higher and higher around how people are targeting. So here are the key takeaways from our seat. There are more people online than ever before, right? And so not only are there more in actual number, but the time that they're spending online is growing, and how they are spending that time becomes more and more fragmented, which is really driving this evolving customer journey for you. And it's going to continue to evolve. So I mentioned at the beginning that, you know, think about all of the energy and time that's now going into TikTok, something that didn't even exist a few years ago. And there will be another thing and another thing. And so it's just really important to keep coming back to the consumer journey, because it is there where we will find the data that's going to help us frame up what tactics you should be in. And to that point, not everybody is in your target audience. And so while the digital world is big and getting bigger, it also means that we can make your target audience just who we need to be if we get creative, if we think about using your data and nurturing clients that are in the target audience. Connecting with millennials will help drive your business growth. This is a conversation that I have with local companies all the time. When I started in digital media about 13 years ago, a lot of the brands that I was interacting with would specifically say to me, that's where millennials are. Millennials are not my clients. But especially in the home improvement category, it's the highest growing category of home ownership. even in Florida, even in Southwest Florida. And that's going to continue as we think about remote working, right? We are seeing demographic shifts around feeder markets that people are moving from are different than the feeder markets that they used to move from. Yes, we still have a lot in the Midwest. Yes, we're still pulling from the Northeast. Yes, a lot of people who move here are retired, but we are seeing new emerging audiences around people moving from cities to Southwest Florida as a quality of life decision, because now they have the freedom to work from wherever they choose. And then really focusing on having a partner or having a strategy that's going to help you use your own data, your own client database, your own list of prospects to build smarter campaigns as some of the tracking in the digital space continues to evolve. So what's next? We do have a really simple tool that that helps businesses understand, like, what's your digital grade and how does that digital grade really compare to your competitors. So we'll be sending that along to you and reaching out to review how that data operates. What does that mean? What are some simple things, even some free ideas for how you can increase your digital presence? You'll get the email presentation, and connected to this seminar, there is a downloadable workbook, which helps you think through your own consumer journey. How is your brand going to show up differently? We really wanted to make the session something that today you can leave from this hour together and think about, like, how can you go back to your shops and apply this information. And then, as Alex mentioned, we really would appreciate your feedback. This is the first of several seminars that we kind of have on the horizon that helps us both fulfill our mission. And so if there's anything that you wish we would have talked about or any type of formatting change that you'd like to see, we'd really appreciate that. And then I included this because when you get the information, if you have any questions beyond the questions that you've asked today, please reach out to Alex and Alexa. I've included their information here. They are going to be the folks that make sure that you get answers and answers quickly. And then, as always, I'm here to support anything that you need to help your business grow.